Do you want to let people know a bit about who you are and how come you're doing this and what we're doing?
Yeah, sure. Um, well, I was very thankful that you asked me to share some parenting ideas during this time of the coronavirus. It's definitely parenting is near and dear to my heart. Um, I personally have been involved with parenting and teaching of children and working with families for about 25 years. I was a Montessori teacher back in the day. I used to teach community college, child development. I was a head of a school for a while, worked with migrant seasonal Head Start programs for like 15 years. Um, Now I'm an IFS practitioner where I work with individuals. A lot of times people come to me for parenting with their children. And I started a Facebook IFS parenting page. So, I really feel like I try to, for my own children and my own family, devote my life to parenting, but also I feel like this may be my gift that I can give to the world, to share what I know and to help. And I appreciate the videos you've been doing to help with people during this hard time. So happy to do anything I can to
Thank you.
share what I
Thank you.
know.
Thank you for saying yes to this. I'm just going to switch the view. I realize I don't have a side by side, and I think that's better for viewing. All right.
Okay.
So, what would you most like people to consider or be aware of or think about at this time? I know it's a really hard time for people in terms of the unusual, very unusual circumstances, the pressure cooker of families at home all the time.
Yeah. Um, so for one thing, I just want to acknowledge how hard it is right now to parent, and parenting itself is a very challenging job. Obviously that we always say we don't kids don't come with a manual. Um, and basically, even though I myself have studied parenting for like 25 years and are teaching people, during this time, my kids were home for 2 weeks and then they're with their mom for 2 weeks and we're being safe and isolating. Um, I found myself having a really hard time parenting during this time. There's so many external pressures, around, do we have enough food? Do we have enough money? Do we have enough time? Because we're trying to work at home and we're trying to be with our children. So even for somebody like me who's had all of this experience, I just I, like my heart goes out to all the parents out there who never even had what I've had, and how hard it must be to be trying to be as good of a parent as you can with all these other things. And we know that when we have external pressures, it's really hard to be calm and patient and curious about what's happening with your child and to be present, because we're like, we just have to get through this. There's a lot of times that and with that kind of pressure, a lot of times there's a lot of unintended consequences that happen, like our children's feelings getting hurt, or feeling shamed, or feeling pushed away, or feeling ignored, or like the opposite of what if we sat down and wrote a list of what we want our children to feel.
Mhm.
Um, so I just want to first say it's very normal right now to not be patient, and that taking a moment and consciously trying does have benefits. And that's a lot of what I want to talk about today, is maybe some strategies, how to take a step back and to notice how the children, regardless of their age, really react and respond to a little more patience, a little more slowing things down, and that actually our goals of whatever we want to be happening, whether it's children helping more around the house or getting through dinner without an argument or a fight or whatever might be happening, can actually happen if we just kind of focus on what's happening for us and how we can slow down with our parenting and be more supportive, and even though it's hard right now. But I do want to say it's really normal right now to be feeling like you're in that pressure cooker
Mhm.
that you mentioned. And when you're feeling pressure, we all have our own ways of dealing with that. Some of us get angry, some of us are, shut down, some of us, might want to go have a drink by ourselves in the basement or whatever it may be. That's really those things are happening to us, and it's really important just to kind of notice what's happening and check in with ourselves and see what we can do to be more, maybe more present with our children, and work with the parts of ourselves to do that.
That sounds great. So,
Yeah. I was thinking I was noticing with myself, with my kids these last couple of weeks, how really I felt like in some ways almost like a bulldozer at times, just trying to get things done. Like I'm gonna, even though I'm calm and making dinner, but my son might say, "Hey, Dad, can we go play basketball outside?" And I noticed like just almost feeling annoyed by that. Like just that question, a part of me kind of just, like, can't you see I'm trying to do this? I'm trying to get dinner. Like I'm being a good parent by cooking dinner. Let me do that. And then as he walks away with his head kind of down, then I go, oh man, I wish I would have done that different. So again, even myself, I've noticed it's challenging. And if you don't mind, quick story. So you asked me to do this video, and I've noticed that I was struggling with parenting too these last couple of weeks. And I did kind of hear this voice in my head say, how are you going to do this video when you're sucking right now as a parent, when you're getting annoyed? And so I was trying to get myself like, okay, this is normal. I can do this. I know this stuff. And I'm really careful not to put my children in a position where they're taking care of me, where I'm making them the parents. I'm very careful about that. But I had this one moment where I was like, I don't think I could do this video unless I get their blessing. And I went to them and said, guys, I need help for a second. And normally when I say they need help, they scatter because they're like, I'm not helping with anything. We're not helping with dishes. We're getting out of here. But they kind of sensed something in my voice, and they kind of were like, are you okay? And I said, I've been asked to do this thing, and it might be viewed by a ton of people. And I feel like I've been a total jerk these last couple of weeks with you guys. And so I'm just wondering, can I have your blessing to speak out about parenting to the world? And my daughter was like, yeah, Dad, like if you weren't annoying, you wouldn't be a good dad. Like I've been a total rude person. Like I've been so mean. Like, and my son's like, go do it, Dad. And he's like, he never gives me like encouragement like that. So and in that moment, I realized, wow, just by being vulnerable for a moment, like showing that we have weaknesses too, also does something with our children. It like softens them. Like if we're always strong and coming at them, they have to hold away or skirt away. But the minute we soften and kind of say, I'm struggling here, it's just such a natural wonder to see how they just respond. And they might not always respond that way. Children might get a little scared of that at times, but I mostly find if it's done really authentically, where you're not seeking their like to take care of you, but just to talk about what's happening, that they tend to really become these really open and curious beings that just want to be interested what's happening. And after that moment, I don't know if they shifted or I shifted, something in me calmed down because I had this background stress, which is probably similar to what all of us are feeling. There's something at work. There's that email from our boss. There's, I have my business is suffering, and it's kind of churning in the background. And as that's churning back here, our outward behavior, at least for me, tended to be less patient and a lot more kind of blocking and stimulus from the children and things. And I noticed, for me at least, that by them saying that, it helped my insides kind of calm down. And something happened where we just enjoyed each other for the next couple of days in a much easier way. And then we don't actually have to go to our children to make that happen. We could actually do that to ourselves. Like we could say, oh yeah, work is really hard right now. Yeah, it makes sense that I'm stressed. Like I'm losing money right now. It makes sense that I'm constantly thinking about it. I wonder if I could just be there for myself that way too. And just say, okay, yeah, okay, I can be here for the kids. Like it's gonna be okay, So I just thought of that as we're saying, like, I don't think we need to go to our children to have them help us feel better. We could also do that for ourselves. And being careful to not overdo that. Like I said, we don't want to make our children our parents taking care of us. Like we need to be there for them. That's the first role. And that does take me into the topic of something I want to talk about, is that because I'm so interested in parenting and how we are with children, and we prescribe this model called IFS, internal family systems. That our job, part of our job is to always be looking like what's happening with me when I'm with my kids. That's part of my reference. Like that's what I try to get back to as much as possible. And what I notice is that if I watch my children's reactions to me, it gives me a clue if I'm in the right place or not as in my parenting. So the analogy I've come up with is that we are the weather and our children are the barometers. So a barometer measures basically the atmospheric pressure. And as the pressure changes, the barometer adjusts and changes in balance to that. And I find that our parenting creates this kind of atmospheric climate in the household, or just in this natural space between the two of us. So if I am coming at you with anger or frustration or annoyance or even disengaging and pulling away, children are just going to react in kind. So for me, what I'm noticing is instead of having to help my children change their behavior, if I focus on my own, I'm able to shift and notice them shifting with me. So yes, there. Yeah.
I love the analogy, so because it sounds like if you can take the pause and notice what they're doing, in some sense, there's a mirror effect going on, and there's a part of me reminding me. I have dogs, so sometimes when I'm just not in touch with what's going on, I'm stuck in my head or blah 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 blah. One of my dogs in particular will just come and rest its head on me, and I'm like, oh hi, and it's usually, and I experience it as an invitation. It's like, oh, how come you're doing that? And it's like, oh, I'm stressed, or I'm out of touch or something, and suddenly I just drop into this loving little face that's just come over to remind me. And this particular dog is like, you do know it's about love, right? Like, oh, I forgot.
Yeah. What a wonderful dog teacher. Yeah, I noticed too, like there's another, I can use a dog analogy too, where if I'm the weather and my dog's the barometer, I've learned this technique when my dogs are very stressed, if somebody's walking past, if I go to the door and look around, I'm kind of matching that energy and my dog stays very stressed. But if I calm myself and I read this in a book somewhere, I'll say to my dog, I got this. I'll take care of it. Okay. It's, you don't have to do it. I'll do it. The dog just relaxes. And I think with the same with our kids that, if I am noticing that they're coming at me with some kind of energy or some kind of attitude while I'm trying to get something done, and I say something in return, or maybe I might snap by accident, or I might even say something that carries some shame, like, why are you always interrupting me? It's like all this shame underneath, like you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you'll notice that their reaction right away will indicate to you whether or not you caused harm in any way or that you're helping in any way. So what I notice is I'm just trying to be very careful to notice in that little moment, if I could just take a pause, take a breath, and say, right now I'm working and I really want to help you. I probably can help you probably around noon during lunch. When I notice they feel acknowledged, they feel like, okay, you get me, you got me. But I also notice they feel like in an unspoken way, almost like you see me, you get me, and you're willing to talk to me as a human, not like you're my boss. Because oftentimes with parenting, we almost feel like we're allowed to say it however we want. We're the boss. And that often causes a lot of resistance from our children. And then we get angry at the resistance.
I appreciate what you're saying very much, Seth. And I'm wondering if you've got any tips for how to find that pause, because you're right, the moment you do it, I can self-reflect, okay, but if I'm really caught up in this train of like, you kids aren't listening, I've got stuff to do, why do you never listen to me? Any tips for how to find the pause, or what to do when you do find it, or how to make repairs, or whatever might need to happen?
Yeah. Well, one thing, everybody has their own organizational systems, But I find sometimes, like right now, I have a little note next to my computer that says "talk loud enough," you know. And I think having some symbols around the house like that, like even a sticky note on your desk next to your keyboard, um, even an alarm on your phone that might go off at certain times to remind you, don't forget to pause today. Little reminders helps us. Even like a message to myself, like in the wake up in the morning, like, okay, I'm gonna try my best to pause in these moments. And I think that humans are so amazingly adaptable that if we really focus on reminding ourselves that um, we're amazing learners as humans, and that we can change. Um,
I also find I do the same thing actually, and if I put a reminder somewhere, I can get used to it very quickly. So I have to remind
yeah,
myself to move it, because then I'll think, well, why is that post-it on the stair? Oh, right, pause. But then I just walk past it every day, right? And now the post-it's
yeah.
on the window. It's like, what? Oh yeah, pause, right? So
Oh, right. Yeah, because that's another effect of humanity where we get habitualized. Like,
yeah,
oh, after a while, it just look the beautiful tree just looks like a tree.
yeah.
So yes, and so for me, when I pause, breathing is, many cultures around the world have used breath as a way to calm your system down, and various spiritual practices. So even to know that, I'm going to switch to analogy right here, is that I once read somewhere, and I wish I had the reference, that things that we say to each other, things that we say to our parents, to our children, is kind of like an arrow. Like if you need to say something, whether it's a good arrow or bad arrow, like arrow could be both ways, could be Cupid, could be something else. But when you draw that arrow, you can pause as long as you want. Like you don't have to let that fly. And once you do, you can't get it back. And so for me, that's a helpful analogy, that I'm real thinking like, I don't, there's maybe a part of me that feels like it has to respond right away. But when I pause and let myself know I don't have to respond quickly, like I have this urge to shut it down, or I have an urge to hush it, or whatever it is, it's okay to say, hold on, let me just see if I can find, do it, how will I feel maybe 5 minutes from now if I let that one fly, And so what I do is just wait. And I realize oftentimes I'm like, let me put that one back in my quiver and save it when I really need, like I'm really stressed and need to shut it down. But right now, it's not that big of a deal. So I'm just gonna say, you know, and if we if we can quickly learn to say, okay, how does my head feel right now to my kid? How does my heart feel right now? And when I notice what my heart feels, if I lead with that, I often find it goes really well. So my head might be thinking, I need you out of here, I need you out. When I kind of think about like, what's my feelings towards my child? I'll feel like, oh, I really love them and I just want the best for them. And I'm sure they're stressed right now too. And if I lead with that, I can get the same message my head wants.
Great. Um, I was watching something on TV the other day, and I noticed we have this expression in our culture, right? Just take a breath, or you need to take a breath, or you need to take a deep breath. And it was in this show, and I
Mm,
noticed nobody did. They were talking
mm,
about it, right? What a good idea. Take a deep breath. So I just wanted to name that, Seth, because if you write down a little note to yourself, take a breath, do it. It's not just a good idea. Oh yeah, take a breath. That's a good idea. I should do that at some point. Just do it. Right? And then, so let's you
mm.
and I just do it just for a moment, because we just
Yeah.
take a breath and then just see how we go. Is that okay?
Yeah, I was actually doing it while you were saying it, so I already
Great.
feel
All right,
good. But I'll do it again with you.
my turn. Okay. So I'm aware there's a lot of information that you've been sharing, and there were parts of me working hard to take it all in, and I didn't notice them until I've taken this breath. If that's true for anybody watching, just notice which parts of you have been up as you've been listening to Seth, and how that shifts when you take this breath.
Yeah, I noticed I was starting to speak more and more quickly, which is a part that really wants to share this information. So now I just like, okay, now I've slowed down. But and I think when you said that, it's really helpful because it is not even just one breath. I think taking 3 breaths
Hmm. Hmm.
is even more helpful because if we think about it, we're sending oxygen throughout our body, and you just feel even your physical body relax. And in IFS, we call this, we kind of feel like we're dropping in. That's just like a phrase we use to just kind of relax into our bodies. And I noticed when I was talking, I was like out here and like taking that breath, I was like, okay, now I'm back here. Yeah, thanks.
So, you know what? So that also reminds me of what you said about your kids, because um, I was feeling a little, or part of me was feeling a little overloaded and overwhelmed, right? And so I was needing to be more attentive as you were being more, um, whatever you were being, right? But I was totally reacting to you. I was the barometer for your weather in that moment.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it's a good
Well,
example of teaching.
thanks for showing me. And so that's a perfect example that, if you were talking to our kids and the listener is reacting or shifting or not being able to attend, instead of getting upset with the listener, if I have a lot more control, I can just shift my weather. And now that I've shifted my weather, it's easier for you to listen.
Yes, it is.
That's great.
Thank you.
Okay. Um, so I guess this would be another topic I'd like to share is, another part of my background I didn't mention is I have a PhD in organization management with a specialization in leadership. And because of my like basic tendency towards like understanding the human condition and try to spread love throughout the world is like, my inclination. Even in business, I was studying how do we create a safe place for people to have voice in organizations, which means creating a safe climate so people feel safe enough to share. But a lot of what I studied was leadership. And I've been noticing there's a lot of similarities between leadership and managing and how parenting works. And in managing in organizations, it's a lot very like a contractual, that we tell you what to do, you do it, then you get paid. I tell you what to do, you do it, you get dinner. I tell you what to do, you do it, you get your gas money. All these things that happen at home, and managing tends to be like pushing a little bit. Whereas leadership is more that you create this safe climate and you have a vision for where we're going and people choose to follow. And oftentimes leadership is very supportive. Like you meet people where they are. You might, some people might need hand holding, some people might need distance, and you're really noticing that as a good leader. So I'm finding with parenting is that we're oftentimes, especially during these stressful times, we slip into managing mode a lot, where we're trying to get things done. We're pushing them to do what they're supposed to do. Right now, kids are at home learning, and in this home learning environment, we might be pushing them to, to doing their studies and things like that. And well, I'll talk about that in a second. But when we're being a good leader as a parent, children really choose to behave in the ways you're really hoping that they will. Like they will help around the house. They will, um, take your guidance when you offer it. And usually what that means is that you appreciate their skills and talents. Like a good leader lets people flourish. Managing tends to tell them how they should and shouldn't be acting, whereas leadership, you like really let them, you're noticing their natural skills and abilities. Yeah, Derek, you have a question?
I do. I really like what you're saying, Seth. And I think for many folks that had been through the school system, whatever the system they went through 20, 30 years ago as they're parenting them, they might believe that they should manage because that's what happened when they were in school. They had tasks to do, the bell rings in 45 minutes, you've got to do X, Y, Z. If that's the only model they've had for teaching, they may assume that that's exactly what they have to do at home, and it may not work in the home environment. It may not have worked in the school environment. So your distinction between offering a way that invites your kids to be part of the process of learning, as opposed to this top-down, you have to, you should, sounds like it has much more potential for success. And I imagine for a lot of people, that's going to feel very different to what they grew up with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, I studied I have a master's in education and all that, and I've studied what it means to, I mean, even I think all my focus has been on how do we get children to want to learn instead of just getting results.
Mm.
And again, it goes back to safety, that if when children are relaxed and they feel accepted and they feel like there's an open environment where they're trusted, they're able to relax and use their creativity and innovation and dive into their learning. But when we have stress around learning, oftentimes, just like us, children go into it, even a different part of their brain where they're trying to protect, fight or flight kind of situations, or just doing enough to get our parents off their back. So if our goals are to really help children dive into learning and engage, the more we can, you know, support them in their interests, the more we can say, because right now, unless the teachers are saying you have a specific time when you have to do this, I think it is important, especially for some kids who need structure, to pick a time where they might be doing their work or something. It can support them that way, but giving them flexibility, some like autonomy, as in research has shown to lead to engagement. So when children can choose when they do their work, which topics, like when I was in college, I might start with a certain topic and get through a couple of pages of a psychology book. No, I'm not really into psychology right now. I'm going to do my other thing, and they put their thing away. And then I engage in that new material because I'm following my own kind of flow, and we can support children in that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have always found it very difficult to work in silence, and unless I really, really need to focus, unless it's very difficult material to try and process. But so I can never work in libraries because I get way too distracted by silence. When I'm working at home, I've usually got the radio on. So again, learning environment that suits the individual, not the one that we are told you should learn in silence. I can't.
Right. Yeah, my son has his phone going, he's watching a movie and he's doing things and like multitasking. I could never do that, but that works for him. But things that you can do instead of so here's like a good check, like if we're looking at our own weather, if we're asking our children about their homework or about their home learning, just ask yourself, do I have an agenda in these questions? If the agenda is I need to make sure they get it done, or I have to make sure that I have to make them do their homework, that's my job, that's going to come across as managing. And children are often going to deflect or walk away or lie and say, oh yeah, I've done it, like just to get you off their back. But if we ask kind of more open-ended questions that don't really have an agenda behind it, like how's it going with school? Like how are your teachers setting this up for you? Or what do you think about what you're going to be working on today? Or do you need anything before you study? Do you need a snack? Or like how are you setting up your learning environment? I mean, to be giving open-ended questions shows you're still interested, and there is a more of a purposeful message that I'm invested in your education, I care about your education, is a very different message than I'm making sure you're getting it done. And when I can flow into that mode of just I'm here to support you, I'm curious about it, and I trust you to be able to do it, because parents are not the teachers. They're not doing homeschooling. This is home learning now. This is like a phrase I'm using. That homeschooling means it's your job to teach. Teachers are not asking parents, unless they are asking, then you have a moment to be a teacher. But if they're not asking parents to teach, your job is just to help create a climate for children to do their own learning and then interact with their teachers, however their teachers are setting this up. Yeah.
I love that. The part reminded me, my daughter and her partner were up for a week living with me. And her partner's 17, and his parents were like, well, make sure he does his homework because he's got a tutor and he's struggling with, some of these things. So I'm like, okay, I don't do that with my own kids. So I don't know how to be this strange adult that's checking on a 17-year-old that he's doing his homework.
Right.
So when I said to him instead, what are you working on? And he's like, well, I've got a tutor for physics, and it's 2 hours twice a week, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, what do you like about physics? And he told me, and I said, yeah, I'm really interested in quantum physics, but you have to go through like the slog of the physics to get to what I think is the really interesting stuff. He's like, well, like what? So we watched this video with him called What the Bleep Do We Know, which is all about quantum physics. He got so excited. He started talking about other dimensions. And blah, blah. I'm like, I'm right there. Next time he met with his tutor, it was in one of the bedrooms, it was 3 hours. I said, how come it was 3 hours? He said, oh, the first hour we just spent talking about quantum physics. Okay.
That's wonderful.
It was a really nice way to engage with him that felt real. It wasn't forced, but I wasn't checking that he did his homework. But he got motivated.
Right.
He got motivated from the interest in the conversation.
Right. That's wonderful. And as I reflect on that, what I'm seeing is the weather and the climate you've created was to demonstrate like inquiry and exploration and love of learning is important.
Yeah.
And I value that.
Yeah.
It's almost like if parents are reading and writing often in front of their children when they're little, none of those children grow up to be illiterate because they're in a climate of literacy. And if we're in a climate where we are interested in topics and we're talking about topics and we're engaged in topics ourselves and we're talking to them about stuff over dinner about the topics, we're demonstrating a family value that we like to engage in discussion and dialogue and generative learning and to dig in and figure things out. And that alone creates a climate where children can thrive in their own learning because it feels like learning is cool. Like learning makes you excited. Learning, that's the juice that gets kids to dive into their homework. But getting it done, is like they can do it's just like with managing. If you push too hard, people do the bare minimum to get their paycheck. Whereas if you inspire, whether it's any job, it could be in a fast food place, like if you're inspiring your staff to make the best fries in the world and how important it is to help customers feel welcome, then they're going to go out of their way even when the manager's not there to do these wonderful things. So yeah, it's a beautiful story that you said about physics. One thing I want to say too is there might be people out there thinking like, these guys are too soft. This is too touchy-feely for me. And I want to say there's a lot of room for firmness in this. And firmness doesn't have to be without love is the only thing I want to say. Like, not the only thing I want to say, but so for instance, children need to have some limits. Like Dr. Montessori, who created the Montessori method, said children are like a river and our limits are the banks of the river. And if we're too strict, our banks are so tight, the river starts running really fast and oftentimes out of control. It's like kids can get really, if we are too strict, oftentimes, especially when you're not around, the kids can act out a lot. But if our limits are too broad and we don't give any direction, the river becomes like a swamp. It doesn't even have its riverness. So our job as parents is like, where do we hold limits to have like a healthy river? And what are banks made out of? Stone or sand. So for instance, in my house, there's rules around how we touch each other, like safely. Sometimes my son can be kind of rough and he might hurt his sister's body. And I'm very clear, especially when she says stop, like as a man in this culture, I'm very clear. And I'll try to say, honey, like when your sister or any woman tells you no, don't touch my body, I need you to respect that. And that's very important for you to respect that. So we could, and I was a preschool teacher and I learned this very clearly then, that you could be very clear and firm, like, oh, I'm sorry, that's not a choice. Like, I'd be happy to let you do this or this or this, but, tearing the materials, that's not one of the choices. But if you like to tear something, I can give you newspaper to tear. So like, we can still be loving and supportive and hold very firm limits. So as we're talking about this, it's not that you have to be wishy-washy and just let your children do whatever they want. So it's okay to have family rules and it's okay to have ways of doing things, but just know that part of this climate of safety and love and more of a leadership climate is that when we do have rules and values, for one thing, we talk about why they're important so that they understand why is it important that we have this rule in our house. Like, how does it help us? How does it make us a better family? How does it make us a better person in the world? Because this is like a microcosm of being a community member. Like, I'm going to be a good community member in the house. That makes me a good community member outside. That might be your family value of how to teach your children. And by holding limits in a loving way and helping them get it in their heart level, like help them feel it, is a way to hold your limits without it feeling like you're squeezing them or punishing them or threatening them. So I just want to say that, it's not just about letting your kids do whatever they want. Yeah.
I'm listening to you, Seth, and I'm smiling because there's a part reminding me that this is not how I was raised. This is not how I was brought up. And I like what you're saying very, very much. So the struggle inside of me sometimes is to notice, these voices that I was raised with, notice them and not repeat them, choose not to repeat them. So I was raised, my generation in England, shaming was the best way to get your kid to behave because I'd do anything to avoid it. And I didn't have rules explained. I was told, because I said so, that's why. Okay.
That's right.
I got to shut that down, right? And when my kid was little, I would hear a voice in my head wanting to say things like, why would you do something like that? Are you stupid? And then realize that was from my childhood and actually wasn't helpful. But sometimes it can be challenging, I think, to revisit our own childhood or hear those voices coming through and say, that actually didn't help me, because that can feel like you're betraying your parents or, saying that they're bad people, and they're not. They're absolutely not. But they were products of their world and their environment that got passed down generation after generation. And I think when we can notice that, we have the opportunity to make these different choices. We have the opportunity to say, I'm going to raise a family that shares why the rules are important, because they are, and there is a reason for them. You might not agree with my reasoning because you're 14 and you know better than the rest of the world, but I'm going to share my reasoning anyway. So this isn't just an arbitrary control thing. And things like that, I think it's helpful to notice we've got these habitual ways of doing things. And if we just in that pause again, well, maybe that's not actually the best way for me or for us as a family.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. Sometimes I have two things I want to say about that. One is I'd like to be there for my children the way I wish that my parents were there for me.
Nice.
That's almost like a beacon in the night.
Yeah.
Like, I think, what did I need? What do I wish I would have had? Somebody to see me, to notice, to, whatever that you didn't get. If you can get, we can notice by what not, kind of like what you said, I'm not going to do that. So let's take all that out. And what's left is what I needed. So that's helpful. And secondly, I did write something down that I thought, even if we already comes out of our mouth, like when we say something that might feel harsh, or you notice your child is the barometer and you'll see their face drop. You'll see them walk away. You'll see them disengage. You'll see them shrug. When they don't answer, I mean, teenagers kind of do that naturally, but I do notice there's a difference in the not answering when you're being shaming versus when you're not. Like when you're kind and disrespectful, they might not answer, but you don't get the vibe of, I wish you wouldn't be talking to me right now so much. I find they might, but teenagers could, they might just be that way sometimes. But I do want to say, like, when we say something harsh, if we can for a moment stop and say, wait, let me be curious about that. One question I have is, where did I learn those words? Like what I just said, just ask myself, where did I learn those words? And just let it come. And oftentimes we'll see a flash of, like you said, our mom saying something, our dad, or a teacher, or a coach. And then look at your child and notice, after I said that, did I get the result I was really hoping for? So I said something harsh, and now, okay, so my child did walk away, did stop bothering me, but is that really the end result I was hoping for? Like, now I feel bad and my child's upset with me. So so then I ask, like, it's almost like, I have this part of me that gets angry, a part of me that lashes out
Yeah.
sometimes. And if I could just say, almost like to like say it to my body, is it okay if I just be here next time? Like almost like you can talk to your anger or your frustration and say, is it okay if I respond? And I noticed that it really helps, and that's part of that pause, I think, is that we have a quick reaction, and anytime there's a quick reaction, I find it's not our best self. It's kind of like you're being reactive as opposed to like really choosing how we respond. So if I feel a moment to react, I often want to stop and say, okay, well, how's my heart feeling towards the child, or something to just smooth myself out a little bit.
I also want to build on that, Seth, because I've noticed for myself when that angry part of me takes over, it's reacting, and it always feels justified. That's the second piece. I've never known my angry part to come up and not feel completely justified. But I'm reminded of, there was a time when my kid was 5, we were dressing up to go out, it was wintertime in Canada, and my doorway has very, very dark green paint on the wall, and there was a little bit which had chipped off. You could see a tiny bit of the white stuff underneath the drywall. And so I'm getting ready. She's absentmindedly picking at this piece of drywall, right? And I know if that gets bigger, I'm gonna have to repaint the whole wall because it's. So I think, oh, Maya, don't do that, honey. That's not a good thing to do. Okay, can we just not do that? She's like, okay, Daddy. And I, got my coat on, I'm ready to get the dogs on the leash, and I turn back and she's picking at it again. And in fact, a big bit's flaked off. And my angry part just took me over, and I said, what did I tell you? What did I just tell you? Because that's what I learned growing up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she looked at me with just terror, I think. Suddenly I've been taken over by this demon, And thankfully, I was able to catch it on her face. Because I was I was justified. Like I told you, you don't listen to your father. I say these things for a reason. But I was able to see the terror on her face, and was able to very quickly move to, honey, I'm sorry I overreacted. That was Daddy, that wasn't you. So she doesn't take on, I'm a bad kid, which in that moment could have very easily happened. But I also want to speak to the challenge of that for many of us as men, right? Because unfortunately, what many of us have learned when we're little, and we've had a parent that's, say you're sorry, say you're sorry. We have no internal sense of what sorry means. All we're learning in that moment is somebody bigger and more powerful than me can make me say stuff, right? And so the sense of the apology gets associated with I'm weak, right? And it can be very challenging unless we know that,
Mm-hmm.
to actually be able to say to our kids, I'm sorry, I overreacted, or I'm sorry, I didn't know what to do,
Right.
so I just went into major control mode. The apology is really important, I believe, because if we take responsibility for the disconnect from the overreaction, the kid doesn't have to. But I also think it can be challenging, and I want to acknowledge that. And maybe especially for men, with this sense of,
Yeah.
I lose power if I apologize.
Yeah. That's really great. And I think you mentioned that the word repair earlier. That I feel like that is a beautiful thing, and it creates that climate too, where we're modeling, like in the way to be a leader of what we would like to see. And I find sometimes in the moment it's really hard for me. Like I lose it, and I do have a part of me that says I'm the parent. I'm allowed to I can yell. I'm the boss, right? And I do want people to know is like just because we're parents does not really give us the right to be disrespectful to anyone. And I find like hold on, I just want to share
Yeah.
that in myself, that's just how I process it. Like I was being disrespectful. Like I was treating this child like I do have more power, and that their being is not as important as mine because I'm the parent. And when I notice that, and I have sometimes I'll feel like shame afterwards. Like, man, why did I do that? It takes me a while to get into the space of being ready to apologize. Like, so when I finally feel sorry, like I feel like, oh, I did something to hurt my child that moment. Then I also look to them and see if they're open? Am I just going to clear this out for me? Like, oh, I don't have to feel bad. I'm going to go apologize. Or is it really a good time? And then a lot of times at night for my kids, like when they're going to bed, that's a nice time. Even though my son's like 16, I still go in and sit with him for a minute. But I'll just even ask, you got a minute? Is it okay if we talk? And even when they say yes, that's an invitation to listen, not just barrel in and apologize and walk back out. And I'll just say, I just like you, in that moment, I yelled at you, and that I I'm sorry because I was stressed out and I got overwhelmed and I let my anger talk to you. And it would have been much better if I could have just like said, hey, I'm starting to get frustrated. I'm getting overwhelmed. Is it okay if we talk later? And I should have owned that. And I'm sorry that I let my anger talk, and I could tell that it hurt you. And I find that by modeling that behavior, children will eventually start using it, because it's almost like we're like a sport. We're teaching them these skills. These are not things that we just have naturally. It takes repetition and observation. And so as we do these kind of repairs, it really shows them how to do it.
I love that. The reason I was smiling, and I apologize if I almost cut you off, but when you said, I have that part, I'm the parent, I can do what I want, it actually looked like a 10-year-old boy. Because, if I am the parent, which I am, and I've got the power, which I do, I don't need to start shouting about that, right? But if some part of me needs to start shouting about it, it's like, how old are you?
That's a great observation. Yeah, I can do it. That a little trailhead for me. Thank you. Let me write that down. Yeah, that's good. So I just looked down at my notes of other messages I want to give. One thing is, if we think about, for us as humans, like, who do we want to hang around? Who do we want to be around? It seems like for me personally, we want to be around the people that really see us. Like when we feel misunderstood, that's a really hard place to be in. Like when people don't get us, they don't get our humor, they feel judged. Like, I was just trying to say something and now I'm getting this weird reaction. Like, we choose not to hang out with those people. We choose to hang out with people, and maybe this is my own feelings, but for me, I should say it this way, I like to hang out with people that seem to get me, and I could like put down my armor and put down my shields and show them my pink underbelly, and I know they're not going to stab me. Those are the people I like to hang out with. And I find that in parenting, like, children want the same thing. They want to feel like they could just be themselves, and yet you actually see it and you witness it and you value it, and it might be totally different than our own ways of being. Like, they might have completely different ways of operating. Like, for instance, my son, I've had to do a lot of my own work, because for a long time, I've been wanting him to be more like me, like be more soft, be less loud, be more this. And it wasn't until I found IFS that I realized, oh, that's shaming. Like, just by helping him become more gentle, it's saying, I don't accept you as is.
Yeah.
No wonder why he had protectors that would keep me at bay and not let me in. And the minute that I was able to say, when I was working with my own IFS therapist, and she helped me see, like, first of all, there's people that are soft and there's people that are coarse. And we need both. The coarse people are our warriors. They're the ones we need strength and hardness sometimes in life. And we need soft and round. I was probably a koala bear in a past life, so it's like, I don't get harshness. And I kept trying to get my child to be like me. And the minute I was able to accept him, he has been so loving and warm and accepting of even my guidance and direction, where before it was always kind of a this. So to know too, like, our kids if they're very different than us, it's okay to just find ways to value that. Be curious. Like, can I be curious about how my child lives in this world? And you might find yourself asking questions and actually going, wow, I could have never done that. I played Monopoly with our kids the other night, and that same son, he was the banker, and they have this credit card version, which is kind of weird. And he was like, and I was watching him buy properties and think 5 steps ahead. I'm like, I can't do that. Like, wow. you know, and there was a part of me that was going, "You're being a capitalistic," rah, rah, rah. And I was like, "Wait, hold on. Let's look at let's this. Okay, that's me. Like, I don't like all that stuff, like purchasing and acquiring or whatever. But let's just look at the skill he has here." And all of a sudden, my heart just warmed up, and I was like, "Man, you have this brain that I wish I had, because I can't think 5 steps ahead. I can't think of, like, you know, if you plant this little seed here, it's going to grow over there. You know, it's going to grow into this thing like that. You know, so if we think of, you know, our families, even like a business or corporation, we need the accountants, we need the HR people, we need different people. And if we all are the same, we're losing all of those skills that could make our organization great, our family great. So if we could be curious about the uniquenesses that our children have and how they might have very different ways of being, I think we could, you'll notice that when, going back to my original point, they'll feel seen and accepted. And when people feel seen and accepted, they want to open up to you and show them your pink underbelly and say, "I know you're not going to stab me." And when you see their pink underbelly, all you want to do is hold them. And you just want to be close to them because they're like, "I'm willing to be vulnerable right now with you, Dad," or willing to tell you what I'm really feeling. But if I'm always coming at them, it's like, I need that armor because you're going to poke my belly. You're going to poke my tender spots, you know? And I just been finding it's like, wow, I am the weather. If I could just, you know, I think of like a warm, sunny day, how nice it feels to be outside, you know? And if it's okay, if we have time, I have one more analogy that I thought of this morning. Um, I have all these, you know, plugs and wires to my computer, like charging this and charging that. And I've always been really careful, like when I try to wind the wires, I noticed there's a certain way they like to be wound and certain ways they don't. And I used to make jewelry too, and I've done some metal working. And wood and metal both like to be turned the way that's natural for them. Like you might want to bend the wire this way, but it goes against its natural way of want to be. Like winding a hose, like when it's cold, for instance. You can't, if you try to do it the wrong way, it's going to pinch, and then for that moment you're going to have a weak spot, right? So what I've noticed is, for one, as parenting, if we notice how our children operate and what's their natural flow, and we flow with them, it feels a lot easier. But I also know, like, if you stick that hose or that wire, if you stick the hose in the sun and it warms up, or if you heat a wire, it actually softens and it's more malleable. So I think of our love as kind of like that heat, that if it feels like our kids aren't willing to work with us. So if they're not, flow with them. But if you could actually add warmth and love, you'll notice they'll also soften and they'll be willing to bend an opposite way to help be a different way in the family if needed, or to help with things that they haven't helped with before. Like a nice warm hose, you can curl it up any way you want. You could turn it in all these different shapes. So I've just been noticing that like again and again, like this weather piece, like if we add that warmth and love to our children and really just let them bask in how much we really love them. A few minutes a day or whatever.
Really appreciate what you're saying, Seth, and I think the global takeaway for me is if I can take care of what's going on inside of me and bring some of that warmth inside, acknowledging the parts of me that are stressed and pressured and having a hard time and trying to manage everything, and take that breath and acknowledge them all. They're working real hard, these different parts of me, under difficult circumstances. That can bring me back to a sense of my own warmth. Then I can be available for my kids in a way that I actually want to be and they want me to be. And then when I'm not able to do that, to take responsibility for the times when I'm not, to be able to offer the apology and to model that as, this is what we do as a family. These are the things that are hard. They do get hard. They get hard for all of us. Let's find ways to make that repair so we can come back to the safety, what we value, what we love, what makes us family.
Yeah, I love that. And the only addition I would say is it's somewhere in the middle, is it's also okay to say, I'm not feeling available right now.
Right.
Like if they come to you with something and you're working or something's happening, you can just even if it feels like it's really hard to say it's a little slower and a little softer, like it might not be that full warmth, but I'm getting there. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna say, honey, I need a few minutes. Like I'm right in the middle of this email. I'm right in the middle of responding to my boss. I'm not gonna, like, almost like knowing I'm gonna lose it if I engage right now. So just letting them know that I'm not in a place right now to help. Can we just wait? And it's a really great tool because it really lets them know, like, that's how you take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you always drop, if you let yourself be interrupted, of course you're going to snap at somebody. So I just want to add that there's like those things, little things you can do to let them know, like, now's not a great time. Can we talk about that later? I really want to know what you're saying. I really want to help you with that. And I like the word and instead of but, because
Mm-hmm.
but kind of negates what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to help you, and I just not ready yet. Can we do that later?
Yeah, and you also spoke earlier of modeling that in reverse when you say to your kid, I'd like to talk to you. Are you available right now?
Right.
It's,
That is a beautiful thing. It's a little trick. That's actually like even a little tool,
yeah,
because when you ask somebody, is now a good time to talk?
yeah,
They can put down what they're doing and choose to pause
yeah,
and attend. Where if you just start talking, it's almost like you're the first thing they're thinking. And I would think too, like, are you not noticing that I'm reading right now, or I'm watching a show? Like, you're just blowing into me here. Like, so that it creates an openness for listening.
yeah. And it's mutual respect, right? I respect that you, whether you're 3, 5, 10, or 15, that you're doing something that's important to you right now that I'm about to interrupt. And I'm going to respect that.
That's right.
Whether it's putting little
Right.
donut colors on a spigot, or whether it's doing your physics homework.
Right. Oh, and thank you for saying that, because in Montessori, one of the biggest goals is to protect children's concentration.
Mm.
So if we see our children engaged in something that's especially meaningful, like say they're doing their homework or they're reading something for school, and you think it's so important to talk about X, it might be good to pause and go, wait a minute, this is the juice right here. My child is lost in their book. My child is lost writing this paper. And if I can just actually stop their sibling from coming in the room, or let my partner know, like, so and so is really engaged right now, let's protect. That's a really helpful way to create a learning environment or in the household, to shows like, I value that you're lost in your work and engaged right now, and that's when you're at your highest human potential.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind and your hands are interacting, you're thinking about information, you're processing, you're creating. So if we're wanting our children to be good students, when you see them lost in concentration, every time we interrupt, we're blocking their progress towards being in that state of flow. So if you see them lost and engaged in something meaningful, especially with school or even just reading a book for pleasure, know that you're supporting them in their learning by protecting their concentration.
That's great.
And by the way, earlier when we were talking about the really loving stuff, you had this rainbow that was on your face. That was really cool. So you'll see later.
I think they call
like
that,
it came through the light or something.
I think they call that production values in video making or something.
Yeah, and it was like this natural, what do you call it? Special effects, I guess.
Seth, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Of course, we both hope this is really helpful for people, especially at this time. So thank you for taking your time and sharing your wisdom and your expertise and your parenting and everything.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you're interested, folks want to learn more about what I'm doing, if they want more resources, I do have a parenting section on my website. So if they go to sethkopald.com, which is SETHKOPALD.com, I have some videos, actually one video, a link that you interviewed me earlier, also some podcasts from the one inside, and there's a bunch in some articles that I wrote. And as I produce things, I'll keep putting links there. So I'm happy to continue to support people this way. And
that's great. So
my email's there too, so I'm open to questions.
Bye. Great. Thank you so much.